What I will report here actually is, well, by now 5 years old at least, because it's the result of a project on predicate-centered focus types in African languages. But I present here an updated version. The original version was presentations by Ines Fieler, Yukiko Morimoto, and myself on various occasions, so about 4 years ago. But this I prepared on my own, so if you are interested in that other version, Güldemann, Fieler, Morimoto. Okay, so Meussen's advanced verb construction, as we've seen, two short sentences, and basically we have a clear, relatively clear construction. We have a fronted non-finite verb form followed by a finite verb which is the same, has a cognate lexical root. So this is the construction, and if we look at the examples in a good description, we can also see what it does. It is somehow related to information structure, and in the example of Sundi in 1, it's pretty clear the contrast between an unmarked finite verb form and the fronted infinitive construction is one of state of affairs focus. So the focus is on the verb meaning of the focus is on the verb meaning. So je vais lire instead of I don't know, playing with my children or something like this. So now I will give a short background on focus configurations which involve the predicate and the verb, because that can be quite complicated. Some will remember already some work from the 1980s by Larry and John Waters, and it's inspired generally by the functional approach to information structure. So if you have what I call predicate-centered focus, you have a primary distinction between verb focus, or what I call state of affairs focus on the one hand, and focus on some operator, so either negation or affirmation or some tense aspect value. So you can again separate the object focus, the operator of focus on the one hand to polarity focus, so truth value focus, or tense aspect focus. And you see in English some examples how this would be expressed in English, of course by prosody mainly. Within this, so now what I'm trying to do is to situate this focus or preposed verb doubling in this typology, and actually it's quite complex. And so there are several parameters according to which these constructions vary, and of course there's a lot of literature on so-called predicate clefts and verb doubling. So I propose a typology which has various parameters of variation. So one important thing is, what pragmatic status does the fronted infinitive has? Is it a focus or is it a topic constituent? So basically in fake English, as for working, he works, or it's working, he works. And actually, depending on this pattern, there are really relatively strong correlations on the overall interpretation of the entire construction. So, if the initial verb is a topic, the focus is operator focus, mostly truth value. But if the initial verb is a focus constituent, then the default interpretation is focus on the lexical meaning of the verb. So, what you see in Figure 1 as state of affairs focus. A second parameter of variation is whether you prepose the non-finite verb, what we've seen here in the advanced verb construction. You can also leave the verb or put the verb in situ, so it would be something like he works working. And there are the other possibility is actually that you put the finite verb at the very end. It's not very often attested, but it's something like what he did is working. I mean, there are no cases is what he worked is working. I mean, this just doesn't work. But nevertheless, the light verb or support verb construction does exist. I will give an example later. With respect to the first variation, so you see an example from Amharic. So in example 3, you have state of affairs focus, and this correlates with the focus status of the initialized non-finite verb. So literally 3 is, it's repairing that he repaired the car. So as opposed to something else. And this language also has the topic fronting construction. So 4 is something, as for repairing, he repaired, which means he did repair the car. So this is an example for the first type of variation. So you see a result in table 1 that we have a distinction between what I call preposed focus doubling as opposed to preposed topic doubling. So the another distinction is whether with respect to the position of the with respect to the position of the non-finite verb. So example 5 from Bai, Bongo-Bagirmi language. It's basically, it's warm-eaten, that the thing is warm-eaten. And example 6 from a closely related language, namely Bagirmi, is he cooks the gruel millet cooking. So this is pre-post verb doubling as opposed to in situ verb doubling. So this is the second example for differentiation. So the table 2 is a more complex range of possible construction. Then what is interesting is, and this is little observed, actually some languages don't have exactly the same construction, but they don't double the verb. They, in the position of the finite verb, they use a light verb or a dummy verb. So basically in English, well actually English does it somehow. It's not, it's working, he works, but rather it's working, he did. I mean, that's not good English. But of course, with the do support, you have the in situ focus construction. So if you look at Hausa, example 7, you see the topic preposing construction is exactly the same. And you can use in the finite predicate either a cognate verb, which is in 7a, or you use a light verb as in 7b. And what is interesting, Hausa also has the other focus preposing construction, which you see in example 8. And the interpretations are as here as predicted. So the topic fronting is basically operator focus, truth value focus, and the focus fronting is well, in this case, not state of affairs focus, but VP focus, because the complement of the verbs actually are also fronted. So we have a yet more complex table in 3. So we have the parameter focus topic of the doubled verb, and then whether whether it's in situ or preposed, and the third parameter whether it's a light verb or whether it's doubled. And now German is a nice case. You can even extend this scheme or the range of construction because you can nicely manipulate everything prosodically. So possibly in Dutch it should be possible as well, I don't know. But so basically in German you have the topic preposing construction as for as lesen tut so which is topic fronting, and tut is he does read, but you can also do it internally and have the accent on the dummy verb, and then you also have, which is in 9b, tut lesen, which means he does read. I mean, it's, in some German dialects that's fine. So on the other hand, in 10 you have state of affairs focus, when you either focalize the verb in initial position, lesen tut or you have it in focus doubling, tut lesen, as opposed to doing something else. So we extend our construction basically, and you see that pretty symmetrical scheme emerges, except for the case of in situ topic verb doubling. I mean, that's a bit strange that you, as I said, I haven't found it so far. Okay, the problem is now, this is the Bantu problem, if you have preposed infinitive doubling and you don't have enough information, let's say there is no topic marking, which is actually the case often, or there is no focus marking on this initialized infinitive, and you don't have enough information about the prosody, you don't actually know, is it topic preposing So as for reading, he does read, or is it the focus preposing, it's reading that he reads. And this is basically my question, and if you see Meussen's description of the advanced verb construction, that's actually the confusion. One doesn't really know, is it the topic preposing, the focus preposing, and so I'm trying to see a little bit what the data is. And so we have quite some more data on Bantu since which were published in the last work. So I have basically a survey. What do I do with that map? Okay. So I will basically have a survey of 4 clusters of languages with these constructions. On the one hand, the Northwest with Grassfields, Bantu, and Zone A languages. Then there's a big cluster in Zone B and H. A second cluster in Tanzania and Kenya, Central Kenya Bantu and closed languages, and another focus of 2 languages so far in that area. And of course, actually, I hope that somebody tells me, oh well, my language has it too, and then that's I get a little bit more data because the areal distribution is still quite unclear. So first for Grassfields and northwestern most Zone A languages. So in 11 from Ngwe, you find in situ focus doubling. So basically, literally, 11 is something like atem, boilte, plantain, boiling. Yeah, this is the in situ focus doubling. And now, interestingly, you find languages in the same area which actually have the in situ focus doubling, but also focus preposing, and they basically have 2 possibilities. If you look at in Limbum in 12, you see there is a post-verbal focus position, and you can have term focus there in 12a. So I ate food with the post-verbal focus position. Actually, you have a focus marker. It's pretty clear. It's a focus construction, and you can do this with the non-finite verb form. So in 12b, you have and for sleeps, sleeping. But the language also has a cleft construction, so you do the same thing with term focus as well as infinitive focus. You front it and have a cleft sentence. So it's not for who is sleeping in 13a, and in 13b it's not sleeping, for is sleeping. And in Tuki, now we are in narrow Bantu, you see normal cleft construction. So 14a is term focus, it's tomorrow that mother will go to the village, and with an infinitive it's literally it's washing that Puta washed her clothes, but it basically means, I mean these translations are really weird. The translation would be, of course, Puta will wash the clothes. That's normal English. I mean, I don't think that the clefts are really good translations in English. Okay, so now to Bantu Zone B and H, which is very well documented by now. There is a first interesting paper from Hardeman, 96. I published on that in some interpretation, but recently here in Ghent, there was very intensive work within the Congo-Kin project and then generally, and so there's a nice article survey of the languages in that area with this construction. And again, we have the interesting, it correlates with certain focus positions, so there's a quite a strong tendency in those languages to have a pre-verbal focus position, actually, as opposed to Bantu in other areas. And what is also, I said in Güldemann 2003 that there should be a climb of one focus type to another, and then even to some non-focus interpretation like tense aspect features. So from basically state of affairs focus to general predicate-centered focus to progressive to proximal future, and actually you find the whole range of uses of that construction in zone H and B. So we mustn't go through all examples. So example 15 from Woyo is state of affairs focus. The example 16 from Dibu is truth value focus. In Kamba, it has become the construction progressive, or it starts becoming a progressive. And in Fiote, where you see the construction in a dependent form, I think there the tense aspect meaning is more prominent, because you wouldn't expect a lot of information structural profiling in a dependent clause, as in 18. Okay, so and in 19th there is supposedly an example of future meaning, but Sebastian Dom actually tells me it's a bit more complex in that area. So possibly they would retract their finding at the time, but I kept it in because actually the future meaning pops up again and again. So I just thought I leave it in. But as I said, there's a caveat for the case in 19. Okay, so what is interesting in the zone, you have the variation with respect to, all previous examples is they don't have a nominal subject, but as soon as you have a nominal subject in this construction, there's actually two possibilities. Either you leave the nominal subject in the position of a canonical focus construction, so you say it's working that Peter works, right? So the subject would be part of the background clause. But it turns out that actually you can also put the nominal subject at the beginning of the construction, and there's an interesting correlation with the meaning of these sentences. So basically, if the subject is internal, or pre-verbal, then it's more like a cleft sentence, and it has the normal. It's more likely to have the information structural readings. And as soon as the infinitive kind of moves in and forms a compact predicate again, then you tend to have more often these tense aspect meanings. And there seems to be an interesting correlation to that in several different areas. So what is interesting in zone B and H, actually the examples where the infinitive stays in front are actually rare. I mean, I'm sure there will be more examples, but in the data, actually in the article, I only found a single example. And all the others are where the subject is extraposed, so the infinitive and the finite verb are more together. This, I think, correlates with the more frequent interpretation of this construction, or the more advanced grammaticalization towards tense aspect values, so progressive future. So we don't have to go through all the examples. We go to page 8 of the handout, and to see something as another interesting variation, you remember you can also have light verb construction. The finite verb is not a copy, but rather a finite verb. Now here in Congo it's of course not do, but it's auxiliary. So basically it's something like working, I'm in. And of course you could easily say, yes, the progressive meaning comes out of the locative schema, but I do think if you prepose the infinitive, there is a correlation to that focus structure, and that's why a more likely interpretation, or in terms of focus sensitive tense aspect meanings like progressive, and this is indeed what in the survey came out in zone B and H. So if you in Sundi you have the progressive construction with the front-end infinitive, and it seems to be a regular progressive, and so a similar phenomenon. And I won't go into detail. There are some formal differences, so you don't always have an infinitive, the same infinitive prefix, and you don't have always the same auxiliary. So in the zone you have D, the copulative verb D, and in other languages na, but nevertheless overall it's the same kind of construction. So how am I going to, how much time do I have?
I was in 2 minutes, I say you have 10 minutes.
Okay, I have 10 minutes. Good. Is there any new information in zone E and F? Not really, so I will actually skip that section, because the languages in that zone show the same range of variation, both with respect to verb doubling versus light verb construction, with initial focus doubling versus pre-verbal focus doubling. So one thing, what is observable in zone E and F, that the focus marking is more prominent. So you really have a focus marker before the infinitive, and you have at least remnants of dependent form marking in the finite verb. So it's really sometimes in Kikuyu or Taraka, really something like, it's working, which Peter is working. And you see this, both the focus marking on the verb by a particle before the infinitive, and you have dependent verb morphology in the finite part. So that is interesting, and my conclusion from that is that it's a less grammaticalized stage. So that would be my conclusion. So we come to page 11 on the handout, Bantu Zone K. There, so far, I only know 2 languages to have it, namely Fue and Mbukushu. I asked Hilda actually in her language, can you have the initial focus proposing? So what happens if there is a nominal subject and she says, well, at least in Fue it's not possible. So you cannot have Peter, it's working, he works, but you, that's the only thing you can do, right? So you cannot say it's working that Peter works. You only have Peter, it's working, he works. And again, I think that correlates, I mean, the more compact predicate seems to correlate with a higher grammaticalization towards tense aspect features, so with a progressive interpretation. But the Mbukushu case is interesting because here we see how difficult actually these things are in terms of interpretation. So the construction is pretty clear, it's, and of course the languages are closely related. It is highly comparable to the Fue case, and I think Hilda is clear about it. It's focus proposing, and not topic proposing. But in Mbukushu, if you see the page which treats that construction, it's actually not clear what's the configuration, and I asked Wilhelm Möhlich what his analysis of the construction is, and he said, yeah, I think the initial verb is topic. And then I said, okay, can you, what about prosody, and can you say something, or he actually couldn't say something about it. And then some of the examples also look like being truth value focused, so operator focused, so which indeed you would expect if it's topic proposing. So as for working, he works. So I was really, I'm just, yeah, it's not clear how to interpret it. And well, I'll say something about that later. Because, well, I don't know, Hilda, would you say Mbukushu? It's identical to Fue, right, more or less? Or do you think it will be different?
No, it's the same.
Yeah, so, so you see a little bit the contradiction between the data from a short description and a grammar and actually the interpretation in terms of structure and meaning. Okay, so I will wrap up or summarize and discuss the data. In general, in order to understand that construction, it should be analyzed first within the cross-linguistic and areal context. So on the one hand, cross-linguistic context in the sense of look at predicate-centered focus and this type of construction from a typological perspective, which we had done in the project I was referring to, and of course in the geographical context. So what are non-narrow Bantu languages doing? And then of course that would inform our reconstruction or our attempt of reconstruction. And well, and yes, I repeat myself, just the Meussen's advanced verb construction shouldn't be looked at in isolation, but really within this kind of family of constructions which are partly related, structurally different, but nevertheless have certain relations, and that's what I have tried to do here. So first, with respect to the semantic functional variation in Bantu, I've already referred to the fact that if you read short descriptions, it's really hard to understand what's going on. So really you need a very detailed analysis in terms of morphology, syntax, prosody, the general information structural system of the language. So I just give an example of the discussion of an example of 41 from Tandu, which of course you guess it's very parallel to the other cases of zone B and H. But actually there are conflicting analysis explicitly. So the first Lubasa 1974, where the example is from, he doesn't say much about information structure. Then within the discussion of creoles and verb fronting construction, Güldemann proposes its focus, but he says that in a line and that's it, and he doesn't discuss the example, nothing. Now Salekoko Mofwene discusses this a year later, and there he says explicitly, well, I actually think it's topicalization. So, well, I would stick out my, and actually if you read Lubasa carefully, it's clear he has another example of the same construction. There it's term focus, and the entire case it clearly focus preposing. It's not topic preposing. But nevertheless, I mean, you know, good linguists just really confuse it. And so this is one problem in the semantic functional analysis. And the other problem is actually that I've said topic preposing should render operator focus, focus preposing should render state of affairs focus, but you can actually show in languages a certain construction starts out in one domain, in a narrow domain, state of affairs focus, but then it can generalize to become a general marker of predicate-centered focus, so including operator focus. And if you are in this stage, then you have a difficult situation also with respect to what was there an original meaning, etc., etc. So I give an example from Aja, a Khmer language. So basically you have the canonical qua-type focus fronting construction, or in general term focus construction in 43. It's beans that he eats, so it's clearly focus fronting. If you do this with a verb in 43b, it's state of affairs focus, so it's cooking, he cooks. And but the same construction can by now also be used for truth focus. So if you have literally it's beautiful, he or she is beautiful, then it means now she is beautiful. And you can also have tense aspect focus, so the woman has hit Peter, it's hitting, she will hit, and then it's tense aspect focus. So what I conclude from that, you should come up with a semantic map, and even if a construction starts out in one subdomain, it can generalize in certain cases to generalize predicate-centered focus, and then further into tense aspect, and then etc., etc. So this is what I'm trying to show in figure 1. And so this is what you should keep in mind with respect to the semantic functional variation in Bantu. So now with respect to the morphosyntactic variation. So there are there are 4 interesting things to observe. So the Bantu constructions vary with respect to the marking of the focus status of the verb. So it could be 0, it could be by tone, or it could be by a segmental marker. A second type of variation is how the non-finite verb is marked. So in zone B and H you have common infinitive dropping, but you actually sometimes have not an infinitive prefix of class 17, but you can have an inessive marker of class 18. So there's variation, but the last 2 types are more interesting for us. So first you have variation with respect to the subject. Yeah, so initial verb preposing versus preverbal verb preposing. And the 4th variation is whether you have in situ focus doubling and pre-post focus doubling. And what is important, in general, the geographical picture right now looks as if the in situ focus doubling is more prominent here, but you already get the pre-post focus doubling in Grassfield in zone A. And in Bantu it looks as if actually it's mostly pre-post focus doubling, but there are a few cases, for instance Lingala, and some other languages like Ganda, where you have the construction as well. So if you look at example 14, so you have, you just bought the book and you have Wagula Bubuzi, it's he bought the buying. And it's not an infinitive but an abstract noun, but in principle that's the same thing. As I said, it doesn't really matter what the non-finite verb form here is. And in 44b and b, the other b also give the same picture. So even in Ganda you have the alternation between in-focus doubling and pre-post focus doubling. So now I come to my historical comparative assessment on the, I think, restricted data I have. So I'm sticking out my neck, but actually it's really just proposing a hypothesis, and I would like to see more data to see what's the best picture for Proto-Bantu. So I do think we still lack a full picture about the construction in Bantu, both with respect to functional things and the geographical picture, but the question is what should be reconstructed? Zero, can I, little?
Yes.
Okay, good. So with respect to form, what would I reconstruct? So first, my general idea is early Bantu had both in-focus doubling and pre-post focus doubling at its disposal. And you already get a trend of using more often pre-focused doubling. That would explain the predominance of pre-post focus doubling in Bantu. But you still have in-focus doubling cases as Lingala or so. And of course, the question there is it retention or is the construction just latent as a universal option? So there, I can't say something about that. And with respect to the subject position, so either we have initial pre-focused focus doubling or pre-verbal focus doubling, I think this is a late development. So if somebody asked me what should we reconstruct, I would say early Bantu could have had in-focus, so he working, and in situ focus doubling, and it also already had the pre-post focus doubling, so it's working, he worked. That would be my reconstruction in terms of form. And in terms of function, well, the basic question is, was the proto-construction topic proposing or focus proposing? My hunch is it was focus proposing. So in this sense, Meussen's reconstruction is actually wrong in the sense where, where he gives this English translation. I think that is not the correct analysis. But of course there are cases where the original state of affairs focus interpretation was generalized towards general predication-centered focus and then to other tense aspect meaning. But with respect to reconstruction, I would say it was originally the construction was focus proposing within state of affairs focus interpretation. Okay, then final thing. We've heard already yesterday from Jennecke that conjoint disjoint forms actually have a more eastern distribution, and if you, I mean, they are kind of competing because the doubling or light verb constructions they express predicate-centered focus, and conjoint disjoint, according to whatever, it does some information structure, even if some want to see it totally syntactic. And you see an interesting complementary distribution, and there are only a few cases where actually you have both. So Matengo would be a case, and also some central zone E languages. So that would mean, I would agree that conjoint disjoint in the normal thing is a little, is a later development, and possibly the early Bantu was more relying on this syntactic strategy of focus doubling and then light verb construction. Thanks.
Some 10 minutes for questions.
Yeah, Carol.
Just to answer the data on three languages, so I've worked with more in Zambia Totala, which I think is a lot more like an M language, but then Namibian Totala is a lot like all the other RPBG languages. And in Zambia, I very rarely heard anything like it, except very occasionally with a focus, meaning like, you're lying, something like that. And but in Namibian Totala, which is very much like Kwe and Zambia spoken there, it's a very common progressive marker. And also
progressive marker, yes.
Yeah. Zambian Totala does have a conjoint disjoint distinction that you don't find in.
I find this in your description.
It's, yeah.
Or-
I just panicked and I checked it is in there. In the,
February 7th.
What?
The book will come out February 7th. So
Okay.
you have to see
Yes.
60 more times.
Yeah, I mean, as I said, I would be grateful to get more examples and to see whether the other Bantu data fits into the overall picture I present. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. I was just wondering about the co-occurrence of these constructions with focus markers that we have at Well, I haven't really worked on this other than in West Africa, where you get so much of this. And there I realized that in Gwari, for example, which has that you're required to use the focus marker at the end of the utterance, and it cannot co-occur with focusing on anything else.
Mm-hmm.
So I was thinking about that when you were going through the examples. You say, is it topic or is it focus kind of thing? So I wonder if it doesn't co-occur with conjoint-disjoint distinctions, then that's not going to be terribly helpful. But I was just wondering if there ever is any such disambiguating stuff that helps interpret the functions when you were going over those different possibilities.
Yeah, I mean, the problem is a little bit that when clefts are approached cross-linguistically, we think of English and then we want to have something like it is, and then we want to have a relative marker. But if you look at these type of bipartite information structural constructions, many languages don't need a focus marker at all. The most important thing actually is the dependent verb, the marking of the finite verb as a dependent verb. So you can just say the person I'm seeing, and it will be a focus constructions in certain languages. So we are unfortunately, this whole syntactic discussion started out with English, and then we want all the range of morphosyntactic ingredients for an English clef. But typologically, it's basically, I would say, for a cleft-like construction, the most important thing is the subordinate status or the dependent, non-asserted status of the finite verb.
Yeah, that's what I partly meant.
Yeah. And in this sense, of course, you don't need a focus marker, and possibly some languages never had it.
Yeah, I was wondering about the ones that are very rich in marking different kinds.
Yes.
of
Yes. Yeah. Yes.
Can you help me understand this sentence from Kinyarwanda? Something like okay, something like kurya, byo, ndabikora. It means eating, eat, I do, eat. It means you have the...
So it's the light verb, it's the light verb.
The pronoun, the verb, and you object mark.
Well, the question would be, what would be your analysis in terms of prosody or in general information structural things in the language? What is the status of the fronted infinitive?
I'm wondering if this is a topicalization or focus, fronted focus.
I would need more data to give you an opinion, because it really depends on the entire system of, on the prosody, how our focus constituents marked with what prosody and things like that. So I would need more data. I mean, I was really looking, I was really puzzled. Why should Bantu, these hundreds of languages, not have the topic preposing variant? But so far I haven't found a single case, and that's why I'm inclined to think possibly it doesn't exist. But I'm still open. I could imagine it's the topic proposing, but I would need to look at the data. Yes?
Yeah, I just checked. I think Fue does do it for topic preposing as well. Where the infinitive can be fronted and it functions as a topic rather than as a focus constituent.
Do you write, did you say something about it in your
No, I found
article?
out just now.
Huh?
No, I just found it out now. I didn't write it down.
Okay. But also the fronted infinitive.
Well,
So-
yeah, there is a preposed infinitive, and then there is an inflected copy after it, and it's I think it functions as a topic because there's a prosodic boundary.
Yeah, you see, that's a good. You see, if you would put your two examples, the focus period and topic proposing, side by side without any prosody, without any, you don't know what it is. And yes, that's really like German. I mean, segmentally, the examples I gave, they are totally, there's no difference, but it's just the prosody, whether you have a bell-like intonation on the fronted infinitive, whether it's the topic preposing, or you really have an accent, so a focus intonation, and then it's topic preposing. So segmentally, they are indistinct. There's no pause. I mean, in German, you don't need a pause between topic and comment, because the intonation tells you it's a topic. Lesen tut er. No, there's no intonation break. It's just so that's interesting. So I would, of course, like to see these things.
Okay.
Okay. Oh.
I have very small information. On the last page, in page 20, at the top of the page 20, got example from my paper, and the page number is 160. You put a question mark.
Thank you.
Okay, so if there are no other questions, we thank Tom Güldemann again and we go on.